Hi everyone. So this is the first voiceover I've ever done over one of my time-lapse videos, and I thought it would be an interesting thing to do to give you a little bit of an insight into sort of what goes through my head when I'm drawing and different techniques I use. So I started here by using some graphite powder, which actually went onto this paper really, really easily. I tried applying it with my finger, with a cotton wool pad, and then eventually just used a tissue. But it goes on really, really smoothly. I wanted to create this sort of cloudy effect. So I came back to this a little bit later on, but it was definitely sort of a very, very easy medium to use, and also meant that I could cover a huge area quite quickly. So I always start in the top left of the piece of paper, as I'm right-handed, so that means that I don't smudge anything with my hand as I draw. I also put something underneath my wrist, either here you can see a tissue or a piece of paper, just because it means that you don't transfer any of the oils from your hand onto the paper. I've had problems in the past where I have done that and I've touched the paper loads, and then when you come to sort of try and get a smooth surface over that part, the graphite sticks essentially to the oil that's from your hands that's on the paper, and it's basically ruined. It's really, really challenging to get rid of that oil. When I draw a lot of these cats, because I draw from top left, it often means that the first thing that I draw is that ear, which is pretty stressful actually. It's one of the most challenging parts I find to draw. There's a lot of overlaying hairs, and I'm never very happy with it, and I often find that I can get quite stressed out quite early on, and judge myself and judge the whole drawing before I've even got anywhere. So I left that for a little bit and moved on to the eye. This cheetah is looking straight down the camera, and it's got such an intense glare that often what I find is that once I've got the eyes in place, the rest of the drawing sort of just happens. It makes me feel a lot more settled about where the piece is going, and sort of gives it a soul from an early stage. So this cheetah is actually a teenager. It's not quite a cub, but it's also not fully grown. So at this age, they have a lot of their younger fur, which is a little bit more crinkly. And this is quite difficult to draw. I find this angle, this top part of the head, is quite challenging because of that angle. It's not just sort of sections of black spots and white spots or anything like that. It's kind of lots and lots of different shading. So still definitely work in progress, trying to sort of get this right. And to be honest, I don't really go into it with any sort of plan, which I know I should. Actually, one of the most useful tools that I use is a Tombow mono eraser, which you can sort of see jumping in and out of the picture. It's like a white mechanical pencil, but it has a very, very small rubber in it, which is great to kind of try and pull out these little white hairs. I use a ton of them with drawings like this to create fur, because I find that I put dark hair in, light hair in, use the rubber to pull some out, and then kind of start again, adding shading and blending, and then have to add those light hairs back in on top with the mono eraser. So I go through quite a lot of these. So I use a gridding system when I draw, which essentially is just where you split your source photo into squares, and then you split your paper into the same amount of squares, and then use that grid as a reference against the gridded source photo. This has always helped me get proportions right, make sure that everything's sat in the right place. And yeah, I've used it for years and years and years. It's never posed a problem for me, although it takes a little while to grid out the paper to begin with. It's most definitely helped me along the way. I've always been impressed with artists who can draw without gridding. I think to practice sketching and really getting to know the shapes of those pieces is really important, and definitely something that I would like to work on in the future. But this technique is really something that works for me at the moment, and I love sort of challenging myself to try and get more and more detail and try and get it as specific as I can, and as close to the source picture as I can, which is just part of the fun for me, really. So this section of the drawing is difficult because you have the whiskers to contend with. Some people add in the whiskers afterwards with white pens. Some people will use embossing, which is where you scratch a whisker into the page. You can scratch lines into the page, which means when the graphite goes down, those sections remain white. But because of the size of this drawing, the whiskers were actually quite wide, so I didn't want to use embossing, and also I don't really have the right paper here for that. So I drew them out first lightly and then basically drew around them, which is quite annoying. But it seemed to work in the end. It was quite hard then to build up the underneath shadows whilst maintaining that white whisker. So obviously every now and again I would shade over it, and then I would rub it out again. As you can see here, I was just sort of trying to get the right layers, the right depths, and really pull out some of those little hairs in between the eyes. It's quite a challenging part to draw. So animals' noses are a section of the drawing that once again I get quite impatient with. I always feel like once I've started them that it looks naff and it's never going to look right, because they take quite a while to build up, I find. So here I started by drawing the little crevices that you will see in most animals' noses. If you've ever got a close-up of a pet dog or a pet cat, they have these sort of deep but small little crevices on their nose. So I map them out first and then gradually build up the shading. Here I am actually using a polycromo, a Faber Castell polycromo pencil. I find it quite challenging sometimes with smooth paper to get a very, very dark tone with graphite. This may be down to the pencils I'm using. I'm sure I will find a way of doing it in the future, but for now, I've actually found this black polychromo pencil really, really good. I've never had any problems sort of blending it. It doesn't blend great, but it is definitely the best thing that I found for this sort of work. I don't overuse it too much, but it sits nicely on top of the graphite and gives me the effect that I want. So we're on to the second eye here. I really love drawing the reflections in eyes. Often you can either see, you get a little bit of insight into what the animal is actually looking at. Often when I do pet portraits, I can see a reflection of the owner who's taking the picture. And there's actually a drawing that I've done that is of a face, and in the reflection you can see a soldier speaking to a little child, and it's really cool. It's quite I couldn't quite work out what was going on in this exact photo, but there's so much detail. You can never add too much detail to an eye. They're absolutely fascinating to draw. So as you can see here, I actually turned off the camera for a little bit. Sometimes I feel under pressure for some reason when I'm filming, and as I knew that I was so annoyed with the first ear that I'd drawn, I decided to just turn it off and take my time. And also it means that I can actually get my face closer to the paper. Often I can't do that when I'm filming because my big head will get in the way of the camera. So turned it off for a little bit, just to try and really focus on that ear. And I think I was sort of much happier with this one. As you can see, I tend to sort of jump around quite a little bit when I'm drawing, so I don't necessarily go square by square. On some drawings I've done, I have just drawn square by square, but on the larger ones I actually find it helps me keep my attention if I have a few different sections going on the go at the same time. So here, for example, I will go back to the eye for a little bit, and then I'll go back to doing some of the fur around the eye, and here and there I sort of add little highlights and shading to other parts of the drawing that might sort of just suddenly look different to me. It's quite good to sometimes give yourself a little bit of a break from looking at the same place, and come back with fresh eyes. I often do that sort of if I'm, let's say, having a bad day or I get a little bit frustrated with a certain part of a drawing. Sometimes it's a really good practice to learn just when to leave it and hopefully get up the next day and give it another go. Another tool that you can see me using here is a paper pencil blending stub. This is just a really compressed pencil shaped piece of paper, so it's layers and layers of paper that are compressed down, and this is always really useful to blend. It can get quite saturated with graphite after a while, so sometimes that's useful because it can sort of work as a pencil in itself, because it has a lot of graphite on it from the smudging, and you can use that to add shading in other places. But it's also annoying sometimes, so I clean it up by scraping it on a nail file or a piece of sandpaper just to clean off that graphite. And here I'm just going back in with that black pencil, like I mentioned earlier. Once I've sort of got a large portion of the drawing done, it's always good for me to step back and sort of analyse if I've got the shading right, if I've got the levels right, and to go back in with a dark pencil and a rubber and to add a few more highlights and darker areas to make sure that that's all kind of balanced. I've actually drawn this cheetah before. It was initially made purely for David Shepherd Wildlife Foundation, and it was a 4x6 inch postcard sized piece. This was donated as part of the David Shepherd Wildlife Foundation Wildlife Artist of the Year this year, which I was really lucky to be a finalist for. And actually, both my A3 Rhino original sketch and my little postcard Cheetah were both sold within a couple of hours of the exhibition actually going live, which just felt great. It's the first competition I've ever entered, really, and it's quite a prestigious one, so I was super proud of that, and also just really grateful to have the platform on which to raise money for wildlife. And this charity is fantastic. They do so much great work. So it was it was fab. I loved this little cheetah as well. It's an animal that I hadn't drawn before, and so I thought I'd test it out just first and foremost for this little postcard. 100% of the money that was raised for that went to the charity, but I also created 26 limited edition prints, postcard size prints, of which 100% of funds raised will also go straight to David Sheppard Wildlife Foundation. I think I actually have maybe 7 or 8 left at this point. So if you're interested, they're only £20. So if you're interested in helping me raise some money, then just pop over to jessridleyart.com and you can pick up one there. I think the exhibition's actually still live at the point of posting of this video anyway. It's on until the end of June. So go ahead and take a look. It is incredible. There are some fantastic artworks on there. I'm so flattered to be among them. Definitely not something I feel I deserve at all, but it's it's great. If you love wildlife, if you are intrigued about different methods of different types of artwork, definitely just pop along. It's free to view, and you'll see some incredible artists. So this section of the drawing is actually out of focus in the source photo, which actually makes it a lot easier to draw. It means you don't need to focus on drawing individual hairs. There's a lot more sort of blending going on, and it just tends to be a much quicker part of the drawing to get on with. So I feel really lucky that I've had this to come to during this sort of strange lockdown time. I know it's been very weird, I'm sure, for everyone, and everyone has probably handled it in different ways, but I feel when I have something like this that I can come to that is a distraction for me, and also something that I can get so involved in that hours can go by and I don't notice. So I feel kind of very fortunate that I have this at my kind of beck and call. I can go to it when I feel like it's going to be helpful for me, and it can actually really calm me down. It can also do the opposite if I'm trying to force myself to draw when I'm not in the mood to. I definitely need to listen to myself with regards to that. That has a huge effect actually on the outcome of any drawing that I do. I need to be in a calm state or at least be really, really into what I'm drawing. I also I have quite an active mind, so strangely enough, sitting still for long periods of time really isn't in line with my my personality. As you can probably tell, I'm probably speaking way too fast already. So what I also do is I find it even challenging to just sit with music on. I like to actively be engaging with something, and for the drawing to sort of be passive. I find if I overthink it too much, then I can get in my head about stuff. So I will listen to documentaries. I will listen to a lot of podcasts recently, and always things that sort of interest me, that keep me my mind motivated and engaged, and then I can find that I can draw quite comfortably for a while before I get up to make a cup of tea. Towards this part of the drawing, I can sort of see the end in sight, and sometimes this is where I really have to check myself. I've heard a lot of artists speak about how they're not really sure when to finish. It's really challenging to know when a piece is starting to be overworked or when it's underdone, and I often find that I probably err on the side of impatience a little bit more, and maybe I could spend a little bit more time sort of touching up at the end of my drawings. But I often find that I sort of get to the end, finish it, and then try and leave it overnight and give myself some time to look at it the next day to see if it needs any final things doing to it. And yeah, that's pretty much it. Thank you so much for listening. I hope that this has been either interesting or just a time killer. First time I've done this. Sorry if it's been really boring. But let me know if you've enjoyed it. If there's anything else that you'd like me to do, I'm gonna try and do a few more videos. But not sure when that will be. But yeah, I thought I'd give this a go. So if you have enjoyed this, then please just give it a little thumbs up and subscribe if you'd like. I don't promise to be posting really, really regularly, but it is definitely something I would like to do more of in the future. So all comments and recommendations and ideas would be really appreciated.